And good evening. It is a amazing evening here in the Midwest in the Chicago region. We have somewhat warm weather, and we are initiating that launch into one of my favorite seasons of the year, the season of the return of the light. And we're actually in Hanukkah right now. It started yesterday. We've got Yule coming up, Christmas, Diwali has already passed, but there's just a whole plethora of holidays right now that are commemorating the light. And what is the light? Well, in this universe, in our material universe, the light is an anomaly, really, basically, when you think about it, because the vastness of space is black and empty, and we have all these different little blurbs that show up as stars and comets, and we turn them into constellations and ascribe meaning to them and give the planets power over our life. So in the midst of all of that, the idea of light entering into and penetrating the darkness is a beautiful and very sacred thing for a lot of people. And on a more mundane level, as we wind down time of this year and approach the solstice, we will finally arrive at that turning point where the light on the planet Earth in the northern hemisphere starts to increase. In the southern hemisphere, of course, it's on the decrease. Once again, duality coming up. And we have to look at this material world for what it is. It is something we have created within our consciousness, within our mind's eye. And so ultimately, we are on a journey on our way back to a place where instead of the darkness, the emptiness of space, there is this fullness of light. And once you've actually had that experience of stepping into that altered state where you cease thinking, you stop the mind and take a momentary break, even a second or two, you enter into a realm where it's the exact opposite of what we're experiencing here. Everything is light. So over the next couple of weeks, we'll be looking at A Course in Miracles in relationship to light and thinking about, this very powerful time of the year, what it means for each and every one of us, what it means for our families, for our culture, and honoring that process of reclaiming the light individually within each person's mind. So we are on a very magnificent journey, and it's going to be a great adventure. Anyway, starting off with A Course in Miracles here, I thought I would take a look at lesson 44. And it tells us, God is the light in which I see. Today we are continuing the idea for yesterday, adding another dimension to it. You cannot see in darkness, and you cannot make light. You can make darkness and then think you see in it. But light reflects life and is therefore an aspect of creation. Creation and darkness cannot coexist, but light and life must go together, being but the different aspects of creation. So right off the bat, we're getting this idea that the world we live in is our own creation, which is a miscreation, and that it is in fact an illusion. There's nothing here. It's very tangible. We can taste it, we can touch it, we can see it, we can smell it, we can hear it, and it's filled with all of these little delights that are very seductive, that get us into this idea that we want to stay here and continue this journey. But as you very well know, simply by observing the world around you. Everybody who enters into this world will exit from this world. And so that whole idea of maintaining a world that is partially lit, but is basically grounded in darkness, is a way that we have allowed ourselves to buy into the idea of our own creation being separate and apart from God. It goes on to say, in order to see, you must first recognize that light is within. So we have to go inside. You know, if you're, again, witnessing the world from that exterior level, if you're invested in all that you think you're seeing going on around you, then you're really on a roller coaster ride, because you're going to see wonderful things and you're going to see hideous things, one after another, because in order for us to be a part of this realm, we have to agree to experience duality. So everything you see that you pronounce good has a dark side to it. And everything that you pronounce evil has a good side to it. It's just very, very basic, fundamental. You know, that's the beauty of A Course in Miracles. There is nothing difficult in A Course in Miracles. It is very easily comprehended. But our mind, that little machine that is constantly generating thoughts and ideas and bouncing all over the place like a ping pong ball, it is constantly in a state of creating illusions to keep this illusion going. And of course, the ultimate outcome is going to be not being able to enter into the illusion in a deeper way, but to go into a deeper level of dreaming. And that makes it even more difficult to come back to a place where the light is starting to enter in. It says, you do not see outside yourself, nor is the equipment for seeing outside you. An essential part of this equipment is the light that makes seeing possible. It is with you always, making vision possible in every circumstance. Today we are going to attempt to reach that light. For this purpose, we will use a form of exercise which has been suggested before, and we will use it increasingly. So, and then it goes on to give us some exercises so that we are starting to step out of a world of darkness, a world of illusion, a world that is predicated on the idea that good and bad coexist and that God is at war with the darkness. And of course, that's absurd. God is omnipotent, and in literal truth, God has no idea of what darkness is. So that's a complete non sequitur in the eye and mind of God, because God is light, and light is life. God is life. God is love. You know, we go back into those reiterations of the truth of what God is and what our relationship is in association with God. So that one's kind of a fun one. This next lesson we're going to pick up on that once again directs us toward the idea of the light is lesson 61. And this is one of my favorites because it's very much a transformational image, a transformational idea. And, you know, once you start working with these lessons from A Course in Miracles, your self-image starts to go through a transformation. Who you thought you were begins to dissolve, and a new sense of self begins to emerge. And it gets to be very exciting because no matter how much we imagine ourselves to be powerful and victorious or hideous and disformed or whatever in this world, the truth is we are beyond magnificent in every aspect of our being. There are no words that can encompass the magnificence of the Son of God, and that's who we are. Or the child of God, if you're into the gender thing, whatever. So, when we're looking at this idea of the light of the world, who is the light of the world except God's Son? This, then, is merely a statement of the truth about yourself. So, think about that. Contemplate the possibility of moving through this holiday season and going with that mindset that I am the light of the world. I'm the Christmas star. You know, I am that element that brings peace into this world. And the way that I'm doing that is by looking upon the errors and the sorrows and the fears of the world and forgiving them, not resisting them, not trying to change them, but knowing the nothingness of what they represent. And what they represent is an idea that you have somehow managed to separate yourself from God. So that's a very silly idea, an absurd idea. It's a false idea, but it's the one that drives us into deeper and deeper realms of suffering and frustration and ultimately embracing death rather than continuing to live. And, you know, how many times do you want to die? Because that's basically what the story is all about. It is a matter of, do you want to live? And do you want to step out of this little personality that you have created? Can you give up your ego? Or are you going to ride that sucker down one more time? This time we'll go down with, you know, a bullet in the brain. Last time we went down in a fire in an apartment building. The time before that we drowned when we fell off a boat. How many thousand times do we want to die in order to come to that realization that this person we have created is not real? That the truth of our identity is that perfect being that God created. And that was, you know, the force that set into motion this expansion, this astonishing phenomenon wherein God created what? God. God created man in his or her image and likeness. So God created God, and then all of us gods have been expanding on that beautiful idea of creating God in profusion throughout eternity. There is no containment for this. There is no end of this. And the most beautiful aspect of all of this is that God is love. So we are compounding and expanding love in all directions in our true state. So only when we're embracing our ego that we're shutting down our awareness of the fact that we are God in expression. So this is how we get away from that idea of separation and duality, as we begin to get closer and closer to that understanding that even within the idea of a paradox in the nature of God creating itself, and that self is us, that there is no separation, there is no division. So God as the first cause is simply a paradoxical idea, because all of us are in fact God in expression and seeking to express God throughout infinity. That's a beautiful thought, especially around this time of year. It goes on to say, it is the opposite of a statement of pride, of arrogance, or self-deception. Who is the light of the world except God's Son? This is simply the truth about yourself. It does not describe the self-concept you have made, because that self-concept has got, you know, bunions and cancer and all these different flaws and anomalies that are really not a part of perfection. You know, all of the imperfect ideas you hold of yourself are illusions that you have allowed yourself to buy into. And we have to learn how to let those illusions go. And the way we do that is not by fighting them or resisting them, but by giving allowance to that component within ourselves, the Holy Spirit, to help us gently let go of them. You know, that's the only way that redemption can occur. You're not going to be able to do that story of St. George and the dragon. You're not going to kill the dragon, but through cooperation, you know, through that process of surrendering the personal self, you can allow the higher self, the Christ consciousness, the Holy Spirit, the presence of God within you to dispel all of these falsehoods. To the ego, today's idea is the epitome of self-glorification. So the ego really loves ideas like this, where it can grab this thought, I am the light of the world, and run with it. But the ego does not understand humility, mistaking it for self-debasement. And when I was a kid growing up in Colorado, we had a radical Catholic group up in the San Luis Valley, and they were into self-flagellation. It was a very interesting and very small group. You know, there were probably 24 of them at the most, but they would actually go out and whip themselves with whips and chains, and they'd roll around in cactus patches, and there was all of this hideous kind of self-debasement going on. And in their mind, they believed that they were in service to God, that God was glorified by these actions. And we have to look at things like that and be able to discern, not so much a process of judgment, but merely to make that observation that we're scripting the wrong idea of who God is and what God is. Humility consists of accepting your role in salvation and in taking no other. So it's a matter of consistency. We are getting into this process of every day getting up in the morning, doing our meditations, and then turning that day over to the Holy Spirit that dwells within us, turning our day over to God so that we can be at the right place, at the right time, say the right thing, do the right thing, in order to assist all of our brothers and sisters here on planet Earth in the return home, on the journey back on the upward side. So it's really a beautiful, exciting, and dynamic process that we are being called to enter in upon with A Course in Miracles. It is not humility to insist you cannot be the light of the world if that is the function God assigned to you. So it's not something you're taking on. You know, you're doing the affirmation, I am the light of the world, but that's not because you have proclaimed that. That's because that is the function God has given you. That's pretty important to note in unto itself. It is only arrogance that would assert this function cannot be for you, and arrogance is always of the ego. True humility requires that you accept today's idea because it is God's voice which tells you it is true. This is a beginning step in accepting your real function on earth. So you're not here to get rich or get powerful or get laid or whatever. You know, the real reason that we are here is to be that perfect expression of God in every situation that we enter into, in every encounter that we have. We are the representatives of the light of the world. We are that light. We are dispelling that darkness. It is a giant stride toward taking your rightful place in salvation. It is a positive assertion of your right to be saved and an acknowledgement of the power that is given you to save others. And here we're talking about that idea of salvation in a very pure way. In other words, a lot of fundamentalist imagery around salvation is that if you don't get salvation, then you're going to be broiled on a spit in the bowels of hell and put on a rotisserie for eternity. You know, and that really is such a dark vision, such a dark understanding of that concept of salvation. Salvation is patient. That's the beauty of the way salvation works. That's the beauty of the way God and the Christ work, is that salvation is always going to be there. And ultimately, everyone will accept it. Nobody will be left out, because since God created all of creation, all of us, as an expression of itself, then it would be incomplete if we were not able to reclaim everybody and bring everybody back into the fold. So nobody's going to get left behind. And maybe an illusion of being left behind, and you croak and you go deeper into the dream and then you croak again. But eventually, 50 years from now, 5 years from now, 5,000 years from now, 5 million years from now, eventually everybody will be reclaimed. And that's the beauty, once again, of the truth of the Course in Miracles, is that it doesn't leave us with this sense of abandonment or this sense of separation from God. We were not created apart from God. We were created within the mind and eye of God. We are residents in God. And Jesus was very brilliant in the way that he presented these images and these ideas to people 2,000 years ago. And, as we're approaching Christmas now, which is a celebration of the birth of Jesus, it's very appropriate that we look at the nature of the man. This was a child that was born into a world where darkness was at a kind of a low ebb, or at a high ebb, I probably should correct that. But at any rate, the idea of an individual coming into a world filled with gore and death and disease and every hideous thing that you could imagine, and bringing a light into that realm, bringing a light of truth and beauty forth on the planet, is so perfectly matched with the idea of the solstice, because it's, we've been going through this process of a diminishing of light, and every day gets a little bit shorter and a little bit shorter, and by the 13th of December, you're almost suicidal. It's like, oh my God, the sun went down at 3:30 and didn't kind of come up until almost 8. So we're getting squeezed into this very brief period of light during the day, and it can be depressing. It can be frustrating. It can be a source of human discomfort. But then we hit that tipping point, and all of a sudden the days start getting longer, just as this child was born into a world to bring this radiance back to our minds. So we're seeing how, this physical process in the space-time continuum here in the manifest world that we have embraced as being reality, parallels a much higher metaphysical vision of the restoration of light, the beginnings of an expansion of light that wells up from within. It comes from the heart. It comes up from the heart and it enters the mind. The mind is always on guard. The mind is always making sure that it's in control, or at least by its belief systems in control. But when we look at that process of allowing love, which is light is love, light is God, God is love, God is life, all of these components are merged into one thing. This is the abstract nature of God. God is not all these separate phenomena, God is the unity of all these processes. And so when we allow that light to come up from the heart and enter into the mind, we are truly in celebration of that day when Jesus was born into the world. That little spark that ultimately has grown to become a very consuming fire. You know, it's like you can go to any Jewish home in the country right now, and they've probably got a menorah in the window, and that symbol of the light being restored, the miracle of the oil for the lamp in the temple in Jerusalem after the big revolt, lasting 8 days instead of 1. All of these wonderful symbols are simply a validation that you and I are the light of the world, that God created us to be the light of eternity. And even though we kind of slid out of the saddle and fell into a mud hole, the truth is that our true nature, our fundamental nature, is going to come through, and it's going to be our salvation. It's going to be the salvation of the world. So you're going to drag everybody in the undertow back into the arms of God. You know, you're like the Titanic, but you're not going to sink. And a big ship like that has a huge undertow. You know, somebody falls off, falls overboard on the ship, and they get caught in the undertow, and they're dragged for a while. The same thing for all of us who are practicing these ideas in A Course in Miracles. We're creating our own undertow, and we're going to drag a lot of people with us to a much higher way of life, to a much vision of life. So, you know, it's really very dynamic, very exciting, and it's very rewarding for us to pursue A Course, because when you really think about it, the impact that this little insignificant sense of me can have is quite astonishing. So now we're going to go back and look at 15, which we did in fact look at last week, but we're going to look at a little part of it here that I find very interesting. It's one of my favorite parts in some of the dialogue that we get from the Course in Miracles. And this one, it goes, "It is because the thoughts you think appear as images that you do not recognize them as nothing. You think them, and so you think you see them. This is how seeing was made." See, this is a visual thing with the eyes. We have to get deeper into life. We have to get to the point where we're experiencing life through vision. And that's a much higher, much more profound level of being. This is a function you have given your body's eyes. It is not seeing, it is image making. So it's the mind that is projecting through the eyes all of these absurd things that we think we're experiencing. It takes the place of seeing, replacing vision with illusions. So we're on our way back to reclaiming vision. We want to experience vision. We're ready to give up sight. Now, this I find very exciting. This introductory idea to the process of image making that you call seeing will not have much meaning for you. You will begin to understand it when you have seen little edges of light around the same familiar objects which you see now. Now that is a very intriguing idea. It's a beautiful idea. And for those of us who've been putting a lot of effort into, you know, sticking with the Course, doing all of these different exercises, what happens is we begin to experience this. You begin to experience the spiritual essence underneath the image that you have created. You begin to experience love burning away the illusion. So you do get these glimmers, these little flashes of light. That is the beginning of real vision. You can be certain that real vision will come quickly when this has occurred. As we as we go along, you may have many light episodes. They may take many different forms, some of them quite unexpected. Do not be afraid of them. They are signs that you are opening your eyes at last. They will not persist because they merely symbolize true perception, and they are not related to knowledge. So as we're, putting our attention on all of these different aspects of A Course in Miracles, I think that, we're going to see some amazing, some astonishing shifts and changes going on within our own personal lives. And let's make this season of light, this Yule time, this Hanukkah time, this Diwali time, this Christmas time, whatever, whatever celebration that you want to embrace, let's make it a positive step forward into a much better way of life, where we are actively participating with our Creator in bringing the light into this world. So keep that in the back of your mind. Think about that, do it throughout the week, and give yourself that little pep talk. I am the light of the world. This was what God planned for me to become in my little journey here in space and time. So we'll see you in 1 week as we continue to move toward the winter solstice and the increase of light and the joy of giving and sharing and being part of something that's bigger and more profound than anything this world could possibly contain. So get out there, share the love, pass the love around, and we'll be communicating in 1 week.